So AAA is out with 2 new credit cards in partnership with Comenity Capital Bank. There's a Daily Advantage Visa and the Travel Advantage Visa. Both of them pretty good looking cards, which is good news for me because I mistakenly applied and was approved for one of them, and I will tell you all about that. Let's look at each one of the cards first though. Actually, we should first talk about the fact that AAA is a federation of auto clubs throughout the country, so it's possible you could go looking for one of these cards and end up on a AAA website that actually shows you a different credit card that is issued by US Bank, sort of in partnership with certain of these auto clubs that are under the AAA umbrella. So you can get around this, as far as I can tell, and based on my own experience, either by being in the right geographic area where you would be directed to one of these cards, or you could simply use a zip code that corresponds to one of the auto clubs that actually shows these cards. For example, you could use 02293, which is a Boston area zip code, which would take you to AAA Northeast, where you would see these credit cards, and there are other ones as well. And as far as I can tell, you don't need to be a AAA member to get these. When I applied, I actually had the option to put in a AAA number. I did not, and they still, put the application through and approved me for it. So I don't think you need to be a AAA member to get one of these cards, and you don't necessarily have to be in a certain geography, even though these different credit card companies obviously have some agreements and some partnerships with these different auto clubs that are under the AAA umbrella. Sorry for that tortured explanation. That said, let's start with the AAA Daily Advantage Visa Signature. No annual fee, 5% cash back on grocery store purchases, 3% back at gas stations or electric vehicle charging stations, 3% back at wholesale clubs, 3% back on streaming services, 3% back on pharmacy purchases, 3% back at AAA, 1% back everywhere else. Now there is a cap of, if I understand correctly, either $10,000 of purchases or $500 of actual rewards in those 5% and 3% categories combined. Actually, technically, it's the 5% grocery category and the gas or electric vehicle charging category and the wholesale club category. So if you go over $10,000 in purchases in those categories combined on an annual basis, purchases beyond that would get you 1%. But for a lot of people, that is a pretty high cap, and perhaps if you have other credit cards where you can already match those 3% categories, maybe you'd make this only your grocery store category. Now, like many credit cards, the way the rewards are given is going to be based on how it is coded from the store. So you might buy groceries at a place that does not code as a grocery store, which means you wouldn't necessarily get the 5% back there. So it's sort of like, they want supermarkets, or at least things that code as supermarkets. So that might mean that at Walmart, it's not going to code correctly, or if you use the card at Costco, it might be that it codes as a wholesale club even though you're buying groceries there, all of that sort of thing. So it's kind of how it always works in these things. Same thing with gas stations. There are gas stations that are just gas stations. There are gas stations that are attached to other things. They may code differently. Anyway, this card has a $100 bonus opportunity if you spend at least $1,000 with the card in the first 90 days of having it. It has no foreign transaction fees, which is pretty nice. So if you use the card outside of the US, you're not going to get charged anything extra. Oftentimes, especially on no annual fee cards, there's going to be a 3% fee on credit card transactions outside of the US. And then second, there is the AAA Travel Advantage Visa Signature. Again, no annual fee for this card. You're going to get 5% cash back on gas station or electric vehicle charging station purchases, 3% back on grocery store purchases, on restaurant purchases, on travel purchases, and on AAA purchases, 1% back everywhere else. Now this card has a cap too, but it is a different kind of cap. You are going to have a $7,000 or $350 in rewards cap on those gas and electric vehicle purchases. So if you go over $7,000 per year in gas or electric vehicle purchases, well then you would get 1% beyond that. As far as I can tell, no cap on the 3% categories with this one. So you've got 3% at grocery stores, 3% at restaurants, 3% travel, 3% AAA. So those are pretty nice categories to be getting 3%. This card has the same bonus opportunity, $100 you can get if you spend $1,000 with the card in the first 90 days of having it. Obviously that's not a huge bonus opportunity, but these both are pretty nice everyday cards. So if you were thinking of them that way, you've got a nice everyday card and still an okay bonus opportunity going there. This card also no foreign transaction fees, which is nice. Now, I said earlier that it looks like pretty much anyone could get their hands on these cards regardless of whether you're a AAA member and regardless of where you are in the country or if your local AAA website is showing you a different credit card. And the reason I know that is because I went down the sort of path of figuring out how to get on the right website and then started going down the path of applying, and I saw that the member number was optional, and then I started going through the screens to see if they were going to stop me anywhere along the way. And I thought I had one more screen to go before I was actually applying for the Daily Advantage Visa, and I actually was already on the last screen, which I didn't realize, and so when I hit it, I ended up getting approved for the card. So now I am going to be getting the Daily Advantage Visa in 10 to 14 business days. They did have a shopping pass feature where you could get texted your number right away, so you get instant approval and can use the card instantly, at least in terms of getting a number that you can use online before you have the physical card. In terms of a credit line, they gave me a whopping $22,000 credit line, which I have to say I'm pretty surprised about and honestly not even entirely happy about, because I have a lot of other credit cards open that have pretty high credit limits, so I actually wish that was a little lower. But, you know, cry me a river, right? I know a lot of people don't have very high credit limits at all, and they'd be happy to have it. Anyway, so $22,000 there. The APR that they were showing me, the interest rate, 16.24%. But when I actually went and looked at the terms and conditions on this card, you know, interest rates are continuing to go up. The lowest rate actually was 16.99%. It's a variable rate that can change with the federal interest rates. So it looks like I'm really at 16.99%. You also could be approved at 24.99% or 29.99%. So if you went after one of these cards, know that depending on your credit history, you could have a pretty crappy interest rate. And so if you're someone that you know, ever carries a balance, you don't want to get a card like this and end up paying interest at those high 25+% interest rates, because essentially you're going to pay more interest than you're ever going to get in rewards. Blah, blah, blah. You know, you should pay your card off in full every month, but just in case. Now, like I said earlier, in some geographies, if you went looking for the AAA credit card, you might get directed to your local AAA site and instead see a US bank issued AAA card called the Cashback Visa Signature. Not a bad card. It's got no annual fee. You're getting 3% back on restaurants, on gas stations, on grocery store purchases, 2% back on travel, on AAA, and on insurance payments, 1% everywhere else. It's got a $100 bonus if you spend $1,500 in the first 90 days. So certainly nothing bad about that card. And if you don't have other cards where you're kind of hitting those 3% categories, it would be something to consider as well. For me, the cards that are going to potentially give you 5% on groceries or 5% on gas or electric vehicle purchases are more attractive, because I have a lot of other credit cards, so I'm kind of going after those big 5% categories, but certainly nothing bad about that card either. Now, I know the first question in the comments is going to be what credit bureau was pulled for the AAA credit card, and I have to say, as I make this video, I do not know. I looked at all the places where I could potentially see where I get my alerts when I am approved for a new credit card, and so far nothing is showing up, but I don't think this is a soft pull. I think it's still going to be a hard inquiry. I just can't see it yet. And then obviously, whether you get a soft pull or you get a hard pull, once you actually get the card, you're going to have a new account on your credit report, which is also going to, at least in the short term, negatively impact your credit score, and that will bounce back over time when you make your payments on time. But as of now, I do not know. But if you have other questions,